All right, hi guys. So, thank you again for coming to our last workshop for the program, which will be around education. So, to just welcome everyone back, we're going to share either out loud or in the chat our name, where we're from, anything else you want to share about yourself, as well as your answer to the check-in question, which is what is your favorite and or least favorite educational experience you've had in life thus far. So, I can go ahead and start. My name is Caroline. I use she, her pronouns. I am from Oregon in the United States. And my favorite educational experience has probably been studying abroad last summer in South Korea through the National Security Language Initiative for Youth. So it was a language learning program and I took language classes every day, but I also had a lot of opportunities to directly apply those language skills I was learning to my daily life outside of the classroom. So I really enjoyed that, as well as the fact that the educational community I was surrounded by were all people who were also very passionate about learning Korean and who really wanted to be there. So that's probably why that was my favorite. But anyone else can feel free to just unmute or share in the chat too.
Okay, my name is Heba. I live in Lebanon, but I was born in Jordan and raised in the in the US. And I would say my favorite educational experience would be interning at an embassy. I've just always loved that kind of lifestyle, and just being there was really eye-opening. And like I just got to see all the different processes that go on in an embassy, and I thought it was really cool. And I got to work with really nice people.
My name is Marie. I'm from Oregon in the United States of America. Um, my least favorite educational experience is probably the time I got dress coded.
My name is Omar Sinno. I'm from Lebanon. And my least favorite educational experience, my favorite was participating in a summer camp.
Awesome. Got a good variety of favorites and least favorites. And hopefully, we'll kind of go into some of the aspects of what makes an educational experience enjoyable for us as young people and things that we also feel like could change. So, to provide an overview of the weekly project for our final week of the program, which is kind of crazy, it'll be about the educational system in your partner's country, state, city, or even just their life at their particular school. So, as always, you can be as broad or as specific as you would like, and just some examples of ideas you might, or topics you might want to make your project about or focus on could be the public schooling system there, the specific schooling structure. So, for example, what grades schooling is separated into and what happens at each stage, and the syllabus and grading system. And there's lots of other ideas on this page as well. And these slides are also available on the IEP 2022 page as always, and also in the Slack. But I will also send them right now in the Zoom chat so you guys can reference them as we go if you would like to. But yeah, as always, the format for the projects is also very flexible. You could do slides, essays, or drawings, or anything else that you would like. And then this page is just some more examples of ideas you could explore. And here are some sources that might be helpful as you are getting started with learning about the educational system in your partner's country, in addition to having a conversation with them about it. So, to start, we're just going to kind of lay the foundation of why education matters and why we consider it a topic important enough to cover in our program. So, incessantly, education is the foundation of future contributions to society. And those future contributions include financial self sufficiency of both the individual and of their community. And we have examples of this in how national GDP often correlates positively with level of education, as does individual income. So, to really just have that foundational financial stability that's needed to sustain a reasonable quality of life, education is not always, but is oftentimes correlated with that and often a precursor to that stability. And the overall progression of society in terms of advancing social mobility and equality and advancing research and development, which then contribute to technological and scientific advancement, as well as advancements, as particularly in health and public health, all of these contribute to an increased quality of life. And really, as a whole, everyone in a community benefits when they're living in a community of educated people. So to kind of reflect on this a little bit, these are kind of some of the broad kind of societal wide general factors of why education matters. But does anyone have kind of their personal answer to the question why education matters, either from their personal experience or just from their perspective?
Okay, so I
People
personally,
can make
okay, I'm sorry,
uh,
just go ahead.
people yeah, okay. People can make better vote decisions if they're educated.
Okay, so also people can really form like a way better opinion about things when they actually know what they are and they're educated about them. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely. I think, especially in today's age with technology and the way that the internet can really rapidly disseminate misinformation, having education around the basic facts of subjects as well as how to properly and healthily consume media and find information is really important to help people have reasonable and well sustained opinions and also make better decisions based on those. So, very important points for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, so in that vein, that's kind of why we're talking so much about education. And this is just a chart showing that previous example of how mean years of schooling generally is a linear and positively correlated relationship with GDP per capita. So obviously, education is not the sole reason why a country is going to have wealthier or less wealthy people. There are tons of factors that contribute both to what income will be as well as what education will be. Um, and there's lots of correlation, not causation, but correlation nonetheless is quite strong. And I think for a lot of individuals, we might personally know people who have gone through more schooling and in general in the long term might have found financial stability at sometimes more regular rates than some of the people we know who might not have gone through quite as much education. And then, kind of reflecting on that, this is a statistic just from the US showing some of those correlations as well for individuals in particular, with higher levels of education generally corresponding with higher weekly earnings. And to dive a little more deeply into the kind of cultural lens through which we are looking at education with this program, we're going to bring up some different spectrums on which we can evaluate or kind of talk about education systems. So, the first one is teaching methodology and values. And a lot of these are influenced by culture, and they often will differ across cultures as well. So, on the one end, we have hierarchical, and these systems typically prioritize respect for authority. So, with teacher relationships, we might see teachers being seen more as kind of professionals who are of kind of a higher status level, who are to be respected and This might also correlate with a greater level of societal respect and appreciation for teachers as well. And then in these more hierarchical systems, there might be more emphasis on things like class rankings, titles, and competition. On the other end, we have more egalitarian systems where the priority is equality of all individuals. So with teacher relationships, we might see kind of more casual relationships between teachers and students, where teachers might be seen more as friends or mentors on a personal level. And on fairly egalitarian schools, I know of some really fancy private schools in the US, where they might call their teachers by their first name, for example, and that would definitely be a very egalitarian practice. There might also be more group projects and fewer rankings and titles in systems like these. And obviously, this is a spectrum, so most education systems will fall somewhere in between. But either out loud or in the chat, we would love to hear from you. Where do you think your school falls on this spectrum? And what about other schools in your country?
Okay, so I do believe that my school is kind of in the middle. And like even in Lebanon here, people don't really call teachers like because I remember in the States we would call teachers by like their last names, like Mrs. Mrs. Johnson. But here in Lebanon, people call their teachers by their first names, but they add like a title of like, let's say like me, people would call me Miss Hiba, not Miss Wayne. Like people use a teacher's first name and they just add Miss or Mr. before it. So I do think it puts like this country as a whole in the middle, or maybe it moves slightly to like the hierarchical side. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but I do think that it's not so, you know, strict and it doesn't prioritize that much authority. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And yeah, I think it's also important for us to know as presenters too that there is going to be a lot of discrepancy too within individual countries. Within individual countries, each individual school will oftentimes have very different structures. Just as an example for me, when I think of like my school is a normal public school, and I would say it's fairly egalitarian in terms of not that much emphasis being placed kind of on academics or where people are ranking within that. But there are also schools I know of, especially some private schools and schools in more competitive areas where a lot of people are wanting to go to very selective colleges, for example, where competition titles and class rankings do hold a lot more weight there. So that's just another interesting thing from my perspective. And then another kind of scale that we can look at is teaching methodology, is the area that teaching emphasizes the most. So on the one hand, we might have systems that focus more heavily on test performance, where classes focus on preparation for a major test, usually a college entrance exam. There might be lots of memorization and also one correct answer or method being emphasized for each question. And on the other hand, we have focus on practical skills, so hands-on or life skills, or in this system might have some more open-ended grading or assignments, and you might hear teachers say, for example, no one right answer to a question. And once again, if you all would be willing to share, we'd love to hear where you think your school falls on this spectrum and other schools in your country. And for me personally, I think I might add, for me in my school, I think it falls in the middle because there is some education on practical skills. There's also some, I would say quite a lot of class kind of goes towards just getting a certain grade in the class and passing the tests, but there are starting to be more options for things like financial literacy education and health education and education about topics like how to have a budget or run a or save for an apartment or things like that that are quite practical and important in our daily lives.
Yeah, I feel like in my school, because we have a wide range of like curriculums, our school is definitely more flexible. Like we have IB, we have like the Lebanese program, and we have the American program. But at most like public schools in Lebanon, I know that they only have like the Lebanese program. And I know that they do focus way more on like preparing for a certain exam than like they do on other things like extracurriculars or maybe another type of non-traditional class.
Yeah, absolutely. And now to kind of, and also if anyone else wants to answer, please feel free to either out loud or in the chat. Um, but in case we don't, we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of a case study, kind of comparing two educational systems, because that might be a lens that's helpful for you to apply as you're learning about your partner's educational system. But obviously, with any kind of cultural comparison, it's really important to preface that for this particular presentation, we're kind of focusing on the areas that are different in the system, and these are also very broad generalizations about countries that have within them a lot of diversity in how schools are organized. And I think there's actually quite compelling to think about how similar a lot of the other aspects of the high school experience, the subjects we learn, etc., are, especially today in our globalized world. But there are still some pretty notable differences, and I'm going to start by talking about the Korean high schools. So, with Korean education, the cultural roots of that system are generally in Confucianism, which is a centuries old philosophy where there is quite a bit of emphasis on respect for elders, on meritocracy, and respect for authority. And with college entrance in Korea, it is based either entirely on the Sunung test or a combination of your grades and your test score. So the Sunung test is taken 1 day a year by all students in 12th grade. And to kind of, as an example of how important this test is, all planes and transportational activity are generally paused on that day so students can focus better. And the number of schools you can apply to is limited to either 3 or 6 depending on the method you choose. And so basically the Sunan test is a really big deal, and it's what a lot of education will focus on leading up to that in many schools. And in terms of daily life, students typically wear uniforms and stay in the same classroom with the same peers for the entire day, with teachers being the one who move around and change for different subjects. There are also hagwons in Korea, which can start as early as preschool, and with these children will attend basically a for-profit supplementary cram schools to improve their academic performance. And this could be in an area like English, or there are also hagwons for things like music and sports. And many high schoolers who can afford to attend Hagwon will attend school beginning at 8 or 9 a.m. and then they'll go to Hagwon straight afterward, and oftentimes they won't return home from Hagwon until midnight. So a very significant portion of many Korean high schoolers' days are taken up by schooling of some sort. And I keep on forgetting to point out what this is, but this is from a show, a K-drama called Reply 1997, which kind of depicts daily high school life in 1997. And obviously, things in media are oftentimes exaggerated and not always the most accurate portrayals of a country. But in this particular show, I think it's interesting how they have one episode dedicated entirely to the Sunung, basically, and showing all the preparations the students are making to take that test and leading up to that day, and how the people around them are supportive of that. And I think that's interesting personally because I have not yet seen a American TV show, for example, have an episode focus on like the SAT or the ACT, or really just the academic life in general. And to have kind of a contrasting example of another education system, I'll talk about the American high school a little bit. So again, with media, very exaggerated. American high school is not like Mean Girls, but I think it's still important to note that a lot of American media about high school focuses on the social experience and how people can sometimes be segregated into different groups by the extracurriculars they do. So whether that's football or cheerleading or band or art, extracurriculars can often be a big part of American high schoolers' identity, which I don't think is quite as prevalent in many other countries where there's more emphasis on academics as opposed to extracurriculars. So with American high school, the cultural roots can be traced back more to the Enlightenment, which is a much younger philosophy or philosophical era, I guess we could say, compared to Confucianism. And also Enlightenment in itself was kind of a rebellion against authority in terms of kind of rebelling against the religious sentiment at the time and seeking to use rationality to guide society. And in American high schools, in contrast to Korean high schools, college entrance is based on a combination of essays, grades, extracurriculars, and standardized test scores. And many schools now are going test optional or even test blind, which means they're either okay with it if you don't submit any test scores, or they won't even look at your test scores. So even that is a changing landscape. And in the US, you can also apply to as many schools as you want, although there are very significant application fees that can deter a lot of people from doing so. And in contrast to the Sunung in Korea, students sign up to take the SAT or ACT on a certain day, and it's offered multiple times a year, and a student of any age can take it as many times as they would like. There are also subject test scores in Korea, I mean, in the US, and oftentimes these are related to AP or the IB academic programs, and those test scores will be in specific categories or subjects like biology or English or French or things like that. And in terms of daily life in the US, most schools will not require uniforms and instead enforce a dress code. And most middle school and high school students move to different classrooms throughout the day to learn different subjects with a different teacher and set of classmates, as opposed to kind of being in the same group of students and in the same classroom like it often is in Korea. And once again, there's that emphasis on extracurricular activities, whether it's part-time jobs or internships, sports, music, or art, or many other things. And something quite unique about the US educational system is kind of the social events built into schools. So schools will often organize things like pep assemblies. This is actually a photograph from one of my school's pep assemblies, where students literally like take time off of class and they shorten the schedule of your other classes so you can go to the gym and just be spirited and get out your energy, I think, and generally also hopefully build a sense of school community and spirit. And prom and school dances are similar things where these ones are usually not during school hours, but they're still hosted by the school, organized by students, oftentimes funded by the school. And again, with these, the emphasis is kind of, there's not really any academic value, frankly, to prom, but there is ideally going to be a sense of community building and friendship that these events help build. So with that kind of comparison in mind as an example of things that might be different or similar across different schools, we'd love to hear from you guys either out loud or in the chat. What in general is your school like, and what in general is your country's education system like?
I think in my country, it's like there's a lot of focus on the official exams. Like, the entire, the, uh, like most schools focus on the official exams when 90% of students pass the exams. which is funny because stressing over it, everyone's passing.
Yeah. Okay. So I also go to school in Lebanon, and I also feel like what Omar just said is very true. But I feel like in schools that like are kind of international that have like more than one curriculum, it's like a little bit less like that. But I do feel like they put a lot of focus on the official exams and like not even just in 12th grade, like there's also one in ninth grade, which a lot of students stress out for. And it is like a very stressful time in their lives. And I really think for kids that young to endure that, it's not healthy at all. And as somebody who's like seen like who's like lived around, I feel like I like the American holistic approach more because it really builds a character for the student. And it doesn't just make them, put maybe all their, well, it makes it less likely for them to just put all of their worth and all of their effort into their grades. And it helps them build a passion for something or discover things that they really like.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. Is there anyone else who wants to share on this question?
Um, I went to American high school and a lot of focus wasn't really put on like grades. Like grades were important, yeah, but also a lot of people are really encouraged to do like sports and extracurriculars and stuff. So I do feel like there really isn't a huge emphasis on you doing super well academically.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks to everyone so much for sharing. And also, I definitely agree that I think there's a lot of value to systems of education, like the one in the US, that encourage students to explore different areas and build skills that they might actually use in their career by encouraging them to engage in activities that might be more directly related to their interests as opposed to only building a single skill of like test taking, for example, because in my opinion test taking is a very specific skill and it's not really applicable to a lot of actual careers. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think it's very interesting to see like the differences too. And next we just have very many charts that kind of show some different statistics around global education, and we definitely encourage you to kind of look through these, especially as you're preparing for your chat with your culture partner, to kind of see the status of certain statistics in your partner's country and also just to see what it's like in different countries around the world, as some of it might be surprising or not surprising to you. So we'll just skim over a few of these, but this one just shows the mean years of schooling in different countries. And obviously, once again, for every single country, there is tons of discrepancy. There's oftentimes lots of issues around differing levels of access and quality of education in specific regions, in like urban versus rural regions, for example. So these are all averages and generalizations that need to be taken with a grain of salt. But this one's showing literacy rate, which does have some similarities to the previous one. This this chart shows there has been a general global increase in government expenditure on education over time, at least within a select few countries. And it's also important to note, again, those inequities and those differing levels of access for different demographics as well. So there are still a lot of gender disparities, with girls being far more likely than their male counterparts to be out of school at every level of education on a global scale. And then the gender ratios for mean years of schooling, you can also see how those differing levels of access are a greater issue in some regions of the country in some regions of the world as opposed to others, and how all of them have progressed quite well. I don't know if quickly is the right word, but they have progressed over time. And again, correlation, not necessarily causation, but more women's education, as shown on this chart, generally correlates with lower child mortality, and it also correlates with lower overall fertility rates, which just means that women in general in more educated countries will have fewer children, and that can be related to a lot of different things around education contributing to better health technology, better economic statuses, and that contributing to lower child mortality. But also, when girls are able to stay in education for longer, that typically delays the age of child rearing, which can reduce the number of children that they have, and hopefully also give them more time to develop their own educational skill set and financial independence and stability. So now to conclude, we just have some discussion questions. So there's a lot of discussion questions. Feel free to answer as many as you would like, but the main ones are: how has COVID-19 affected your educational experience? And how did your school or your country school as a whole respond to COVID? And would you consider that responsive effective or not? So I think we'll just actually go one by one with the questions so we don't get overwhelmed. But yeah, does anyone want to share on the COVID-19 one?
In Lebanon 19, like honestly, after COVID, no one learned anything. Like we were not ready to go online, and the university moved like 70% of lessons. So, yeah,
Okay. Also in Lebanon, I really feel like it depends on where you go to school because I really think that more well-funded schools, like my school, like we still have to learn things online and we have to go to school like for about the same time that we were going physically, maybe like an hour or two less. But I do know like my sister, she had not yet transferred to my school, and her school it wasn't really as well funded as my school. So they definitely did not really learn much online. Like she was in, I think, fifth grade or sixth, and she had school like 3 days a week, which is like really concerning, honestly. And then like when she transferred to my school, she had a lot to catch up on because everybody here was already, caught up with everything. But if we're talking about like my country as a whole, I feel like a lot of people missed out on their education in COVID.
be honest, it's not really about, from what I've seen, it's not really about funding. It's just that if you follow these program, it's something. And then if you follow like international programs or IB, because there are some schools that do that, it's way better. I don't think it's about funding. I go to a well-funded school, and to be honest, I don't learn anything.
Oh, well, like I also have friends who go to like pretty well-off schools and like they also told me that like they really had a school that focused on online education as well. But I'm not sure like about your case in particular.
Yeah, online education in my school was fine, but yeah, but as I most hands-on, we didn't learn anything, especially that my school focuses a lot on the official exams, which everyone passes. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I see, I see.
Um, with COVID in my school, we went online, like fully online for maybe like about a year. And then like some of us went back to school in person and some stayed online. And then um this school year, everyone was in school and you just had to like wear masks. But by the end of the year, almost nobody was like wearing masks in school because it wasn't like the law anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I think it's the online education is a good point to around I think at least ours, I felt like our school was definitely not prepared for online education. And for us with the pandemic, I feel like there was a constant sense that the pandemic was going to end soon. So then we wouldn't have to be online. So teachers didn't fully like commit to the online thing. But then that kept on not happening. So it kind of kept perpetuating the like mediocre quality of online education. And also I think it was just really hard to learn online for a lot of people, for like being able to focus when you're at home and on a computer screen, especially when no one else's like camera was on or no one was participating in class. It didn't really feel like real school for a lot of people, including myself, which definitely impacted a lot of people's ability to learn and absorb information. And for our school too, our classes we basically had 4 classes a week with significantly shorter hours compared to our normal school years of 5 days a week. And what was interesting to me though is that there are actually not a lot, but there is actually quite a few schools in Oregon and other places, particularly in rural regions, that already do 4 days of school a week, even in a normal year, to kind of accommodate working schedules, especially with local farms. So it was really interesting to me to learn that and have that discussion around 4 days of school enter my community, because that wasn't something that I really knew was a thing before. Um, yeah, so the next discussion question is just a little more philosophical, but what do you think is the overall goal of your country's educational system? And what do you personally think should be the goal of an education? And how would you change or not change your country's education system to be more supportive of what you think should be the goal?
I think we have to like remove the ninth grade, the official exams. They're useless. Uh, Second of all, we have to uh, like add more lessons and make the subject representative of what someone might work in them. Like for example, people who go into engineering go just purely on their physics grades, but there's a difference between physics and engineering. So maybe we can alter physics or add engineering as a subject. But like we have representation.
Okay. On that note, I do agree about like just like not putting that much pressure on official exams, because it really perpetuates a very toxic culture, and one that really makes students put all of their worth on grades. And as I said before, I really think that students should have the opportunity to explore a realm outside of that. Now, I'm not in like the national program of education here, but if I were to change it, I would make it more flexible, and I would probably make like the official exams test optional, and I would completely wipe out like the ninth grade official exam, because I just think it's cruel to put children through all of that stress.
Yeah, definitely. And Annalise or Marie, do you want to share on this question? Or totally okay if not too.
I think the goal is to like give kids enough uh information to be able to go to college like if they want to. Um and I think that the goal of education should be to like help individual students, succeed in like what they want to do. So I wish more schools had like trade programs that were promoted, because yeah, a lot of people go into the trades as well.
Yeah, definitely. And lots of good insights from everyone. I like how there's very like specific things that a lot of us can identify as being things that really just don't benefit students within our educational systems. Um, yeah, and for me personally, I think education's goal, it's very broad, but generally to help young people reach their full potential and discover what it is they want to do with their lives and the kind of impact they want to make in the world and help them move forward on that journey. And that journey looks very different for every individual student, whether that is through going to college or through pursuing a career in the trades or some other area. But giving students the autonomy to realize what it is they want to do by exploring those outside interests and giving them classes that really pertain to things that they want to be learning about, and presenting information in a way that ties it to the real world and how we're actually going to use it, I think would help me personally. Because I think one of my main grievances with, even though I'm very lucky to be in the US education system, I've still learned a lot more, in my opinion, from my out of school activities than my classes. And that's because I can see the direct impact of whatever it is I'm doing, or I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Whereas sometimes when I'm taking like AP calculus, I don't really know how I'm going to use my knowledge of like derivatives in my real life or in my real career. So if curriculum emphasized the actual applications of what we were learning and why they mattered, I think that would be more contributive to a good education system. So the last question is there strong political debate or polarization around schools and education in your country? And why do you feel those debates exist or don't exist?
I think there's been like a lot of debate in the US over like um adding like certain books or like talking about LGBTQ issues in schools.
Okay, so here in Lebanon, I do not think that there's a lot of debate when it comes to like the national curriculum because like it's been the same way for I don't even know how many decades. Like it has not evolved, and like personally for me, I'm in the IB, and they like I'm pretty sure that they go over like our system every like 5 years, and like they like oftentimes they change things completely to the point where you might even need to buy a new book for the subject. So I do like the kind of the IB way of teaching. Like it is super stressful, but I do think it's worth it. And I really think that as an education system, it should be something that evolves over time to cater to our time's present needs, not just one that is, it's been here for I don't know how many decades and it's not really evolving or going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think it's interesting, kind of. I would say the level of politicization of schools is fairly unique in the United States, especially now. A lot of debates are around like LGBTQ plus issues in schools and also curriculum related to racism. And there have been, for example, like a lot of specific state bills. Um, I think it's literally called Stop Woke Education in Florida, and a variety of other bills in different states. But I think in the US specifically, it's because it's in part because education is at the intersection of federal power and state power and local power, where we have local school boards who have quite a bit of jurisdiction over how a school or how a district operates. But then the state might also have laws that these districts are kind of forced to follow, even if it doesn't really meet the district's specific desires or needs for their students. And then there are those federal laws around education, which typically aren't as influential as state laws in the US system, but they still exist, and states and districts are expected to follow them. So it's and especially when a state and the federal government, well, when the federal government is controlled by a party different from the one that's dominant in a state, that can lead to some pretty significant ideological clashes. And I think that's part of why it's such a big thing in the US, and maybe not quite as much, or at least not the same specific issues in other countries. But yeah, so anything else people wanted to share on that before we kind of close out? Alright, if not, that was a really wonderful discussion and very enlightening for me personally, so thank you all for sharing on that. So now we're just going to go over some final reminders as the program is drawing to a close somehow. So this Saturday at 8 a.m. Pacific time is the final program call, and we are expecting all participants to attend, but if you can't attend, just let us know in advance, either DMing us or in the help channel, and we'll probably record the meeting and or share a recap of that meeting in the Slack for people who cannot attend. And then during that meeting, we're going to do some like not icebreakers, but like kind of speed meeting people from across the program, because we have a lot of different workshop times, so we don't usually get everyone in the same space. So hopefully getting everyone a chance to meet some new people from the program, also collecting feedback on how the program went and discussing details around certificates of completion and kind of just next steps for staying involved and things like that. So all project submissions are also due by August 21st, which is this Sunday, to count toward your certificate of participation, and you need to submit at least one project to receive that certificate. But we will be giving special recognition on the certificate for individuals who submit all 4 projects. And also, if you want to be eligible for further awards or cash prizes that we're planning on giving out to some of our most engaged students, you must submit all 4 projects. And lastly, because we are nearing the end, we would encourage you to stay connected with our organization, with the World and Us, by following us on social media or keeping in touch on the Slack, which we will keep active and open even after the program ends. And we'll also go over this more during the final program call, but if you're really interested in getting into the behind the scenes work of programs like this one, you could also consider joining our team. But yeah, that was all that I had. So if you all have any questions, I am happy to answer them now. If not, feel free to leave the meeting. Yeah, thank you all so much.